Recording 9. The Bell. This letter got stuck halfway through my letterbox. I opened the envelope and realised that a small silver bell had been the cause of the obstruction. This little thing is beautiful but has no markings or engraving on it. I was going to put it up in my display case, but after reading the letter attached, I think it should go in a box in my attic, if I keep it at all. Melissa's story might make me think twice when the church bell tolls on Sundays. Lisa, this is rather odd for me, as I have not written to anyone about this before. I felt as though no one would believe me or dare to. However, I am your biggest fan, and I feel that this occurrence would be of great interest to you. Lisa, when I was little, I always believed in fairy tales. Any tales, really. It was an issue, actually. My parents were forever trying to make me understand the difference between fiction and non-fiction. However, for me, the boundary between real and unreal was as close as oil to water, never mixing, but so close that they bounced off each other. My father would often say, if I kept running away with the fairies, I'd never come back. Perhaps he had a point. My parents both worked a lot, so I often spent weekends with my grandmother, a wonderfully rich character of a woman. She'd once worked in the circus, but had settled in a small town on a hill in Yorkshire. Her house was always very exciting to me, filled with the trinkets of her forgotten touring life. She even had a pet monkey, Jericho, that a friend in the circus had sold to her for 10 bob. It was a frightfully friendly creature, always wanting to play and cause havoc. We often had to hide it when the police came round to check about the noise it made. My grandmother had collected, along with the trinkets, passion for local legends and told me all about them. The one I loved the most, the one I found most fascinating but frightening, goes like this. Once upon a time, there lived several children who used to play on the moors. They would play all day, then go home for their tea. The children knew what time to come back, as a bell would ring out. One day, however, no bell could be heard at all. It got darker and darker, and the children, noticing this, hurried back. Reaching home, the children found the houses deserted, things that had been left as though everyone had disappeared during their lunches. The children at first believed it was a joke, but became terrified by the lack of animals. No birds sang in the trees, and no cats bathed in the sun. It was as if they had been wiped off the face of the earth. Children began to cry and fear, worried that they may never see their families again, when all of a sudden a noise rang out. It was a noise the children had never heard before. It was deep, so deep in fact, it sounded as though some of the noise was deeper than what their ears could take in. With nothing else for them to do, they set off towards the sound. They located the direction of the noise and set off, their tiny feet carrying them far away from their homes and the moors towards lands they'd never seen before. They travelled far, but could never seem to catch up to the sound. Over time, they grew up, now carrying children of their own with them. The sound became weaker and weaker until they settled down, creating their own small village. Time passed, and soon they forgot about the sound. They also sent their children out to play, remembering how they used to enjoy those innocent days. Their children would play, and when darkness fell, they would return. However, one day, the now grown children could hear a bell, a small, simple dinging ringing out. Coming out of their homes, they saw a figure, tall and thin, draped in a black cloak, a small bell in his hand. He stopped his ringing and lifted his hood to unveil a naked skull. He smiled before stealing the adult souls, their screams ringing out deep and low as he carried them back with him to hell. I have no idea why my grandmother would tell me such a frightening story. She always told them with such glee. The most upsetting part of this story, however, was that my grandmother would always laugh and say that she met the man with the bell. She told me she met him once as a girl, and he told her that she could not hear yet, so she was not worth taking. Oh, I would have nightmares for days after that particular story. I had severe anxiety when I heard ringing sounds. With a lot of help, I got over my fears and was living a normal life until my grandmother died. She had lived a very long life and had left a lot of stuff to sort through and sell. Shifting through her trinkets and property, I found the stuffed remains of Jericho, his coat as soft as the day he died, his glassy fake eyes far less intense than his mischievous ones which watched me enter that house many a time. There were a lot of things that I thought collectors of curiosities might be interested in. Digging through boxes of pennies and watches, found a small silver bell. It was tiny, as though designed to be used by a baby. It took me a moment to collect myself after finding it. It had immediately reminded me of the tale, but I realised that they were most likely unrelated. A lot of people collect bells, and my grandmother had collected so much random stuff, she probably thought it was pretty. I pocketed it and forgot about it for days, only finding it months later when digging for change in my coat pocket. Taking it out, I absent-mindedly shook it. It emitted a very feeble tinkle. I felt relieved. I don't know why a small part of me worried it might bring out something demonic in nature. I put it on my mantelpiece, decorative and pretty. It stayed there all year, being joined by more ornaments at Christmas. I was hosting that very Christmas, and my family were round having a great time. My niece, however, was fascinated by all my decorations and demanded to hold them all as she wanted to inspect them. She was very keen on the bell. I handed it to her, thinking nothing of it. She grasped it excitedly in her tiny hands and began ringing it immediately. It would have been sweet, cute even, but I was suddenly taken by fear. The noise emanating from it was not the small tinkle that had come when I rang it. The noise was now deep, too deep even. Something that small could not physically create such a noise. The other adults in the room noticed this as well, but thought it must be some sort of novelty joke. I was brought to tears very quickly, and someone took the bell from my niece, who hadn't noticed the commotion she was causing. The room fell silent, and everyone seemed spooked. Nervous laughter started, people believing it was some sort of joke. I took the bell and rang it. The small tinkle was back. My niece looked confused, and in her little voice she spat out, "Oh, so it does make a sound." We all very nervously looked at her. "What do you mean, does make sound?" Sam, my brother-in-law, asked her.
"Why didn't it work when I shook it?"
she said, stroppily, reaching up for the small trinket. The adults in the room were dead silent, the only noise being my niece's angry snivels as she tried to take it back. Everyone else realised that this was not a good thing. I don't know how, but the tension lifted at some point in the evening, and by the time we all went to bed, it had been forgotten. In the dead of the night, the deep sound began again. I ran to the bell on the mantelpiece and found it missing. The rest of the adults in the family seemed to be awake as well, rushing around the house looking for the bell. There was a loud scream from the garden, and the deep ringing stopped. We found my niece standing at the bottom of the garden, holding the bell. She seemed confused and worried, and began to sob. As we took her inside, she mumbled out, "Uncle Sammy! He took Uncle Sammy!" We tried to calm her down, but we could not find Sam. Sam has been missing for months now. My family can't understand why, but I think the bellman took him. I've explained this all to other members of my family, but they don't or won't believe that this is the case. The neighbours' cats are also going missing. In either case, I can't have the bell in my house anymore. I don't want it happening again, or continue happening, if it's still going on. I've sent you the bell. You might be able to find out what it is or where it came from. I hope you strike lucky with it. Melissa. Whew. I worry for Melissa's family, especially her niece and poor Sam. And thankfully the pip of the bell is missing. Yeah, it must have fallen out in the post, but This means I can't ring it to test if the story rings true or not. I could go and get a replacement, but maybe it's best left unringable. If Melissa's grandmother's story has an ounce of truth in it, I think it's probably for the best. That was recording 9, The Bell. Written by Phoebe Critchlow. Narrated by Caroline Lawrie.